Hello, and welcome to today's epic episode of Book Club. We will continue our deep dive into Lee Park's Total Control by discussing Chapter 2, Steering. What is countersteering? What is Raked Trail? Well, it's not what you do in your backyard after you mow the lawn. We answer these questions and more, so join us in our effort to share the wealth of knowledge and help make our streets safer for our two-wheeled compatriots. Good day to you. Welcome to the Epic Motorcycle Channel's Book Club. Today we're going to go over Total Control by Lee Parks, Chapter 2, which is on steering. So, what are some of the things that you remember from this chapter that you found interesting? One of the things that I liked was like hard definitions of some of these things like Raked Trail and things like that, you know, because those are the things that you see specs on motorcycle spec sheets, you know. It's like, oh, it has a rake of X degrees and a trail of whatever millimeters, and you know, it's like, I guess that's good. I don't know. And so having a definition for those things, I think, was definitely beneficial to actually see, you know.
Yeah, I like the scientific way that they try to explain counter steering.
Yeah.
Because I on dirt bikes, so when I moved to riding street, counter steering was wonky and it was not like confidence inspiring to me.
Right.
It was really scary at first.
Right.
And you had to kind of commit to it. And then once you feel it, then it was like, oh wow, this is neat. But it was like, I don't know, just being able to understand it scientifically.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about countersteering that is that, you know, when you read the definition of what you're supposed to do, and then you're consciously trying to do it, it's like, okay, I have to, you know, push in the push. If I'm going left, I have to push left, and then when you're thinking about it and doing it, it feels kind of strange, or it makes me kind of nervous, you know. But if you don't think about it and you just do it, it's not scary because it just feels natural. It's like the breaking down of what you're doing. Oh, I have to turn it the opposite way. It's like, well, why do you do that? But you know, and here they break it down on how it, you know, it tracks your tire to the outside of the curve, which makes you dip inward, right? And so that was the mechanism for that working. And you know,
you get exposed when the wheel turns, you're exposed inside contact patch, so naturally, you know what I mean, it's gonna lay that way.
Right. And then the other part of that, which I found super interesting, was, let's see if I can get, so the cool thing that I liked about the whole not just counter steering, but this bit was this part down here where you have this, you know, the tire has a rounded profile. So as you lean on it, the inside of the tire has a smaller radius than the outside, or the tip of the tire. And so it's like a cup, like, you know, you have a cup and you put it on that side and you roll it and it goes around in a circle. It's like, I never thought of that before. It's like, oh, that totally makes sense, because, you know, as you lean more, the inside of your tire has a smaller, you know, radius than the center of the tire, so it's going to naturally go that way. And so it's like, of course.
Good. I totally agree.
Yeah, that was definitely one of those kind of aha moments that I had when I was reading this. I was like, oh wow, yeah, totally.
What I noticed was, like, so when I first read this whole thing through after I moved out here, I tried to do some of the stuff, and especially with the steering, it's hard to remember everything. Like, I need to read the book 4 more times, because I don't remember whether you're supposed to push with the inside or pull with the outside.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I know that I remember the braking stuff. You never want to jam it at all. It's like you almost want to do everything without upsetting the attitude of the bike at any given time.
Right.
You know,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Anything that you do suddenly is bad. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But it's when you're focusing on that, it feels like, I don't even know how to describe it. It almost feels like you're almost like a yo-yo or something. Like I did not feel smooth or comfortable, and it seemed like the more I tried to smooth out and make it work, the worse it got. It's almost like, I don't know. I think you need to focus on what you're doing, and then maybe a small percentage on the technique. You know what I mean? And stay with one until it develops, and then move to the next thing or something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally with you because, you know, it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, when you start thinking about it, that's when it becomes harder for some reason, you know. It's like, you know, you want it to be as natural as possible, you know, kind of like I was saying with the steering. It's like, if I'm thinking, oh, I push on the inside, if I'm turning left, I want to push forward with my left. That doesn't make sense. And now I'm thinking about it, and I'm kind of overly self-conscious about every little bit of input that I feel, and then like, okay, was that right? You know, do I feel off balance? That sort of thing. Towards the end of this chapter, one of the things that I thought was great advice, and it's one of the things I find myself doing every once in a while, is that you know, when you're counter steering and you have to go forward, you know, forward with the left to turn to the left, or vice versa, forward with the right to turn with the right, only do it with the inside hand. Don't try to like push left and pull right. Just
one arm.
Just one arm it and go left, push. And yeah, you do kind of have a little bit better feel for it. You know, like I can kind of feel if it's kind of coming back, you know, or if you know, there's pressure coming back on the bar, or how much I have to push to keep it going, and you know, what kind of steering inputs. And I find that helped a lot, actually, because you know, before, you know, your natural reaction is just, you know, I'm holding on and I'm, you know, steering like this or whatever. But you know, those little adjustments, like, okay, I'm just going to use one arm for all my force, and then you kind of have a better feel for it, you know. And I can't remember exactly how he put it in the book, but there was a way that he described it as to, you know, that it was just easier with one hand. What was it? Let me see if I can find it real quick. But yeah, it was, I think he described something else that you only do with one hand.
Well, the one hand is also like, if you're using both of them, then you'll get noise from one. So you can't really, like you said, like you can't really gauge it. And I know that when I first started riding my bike, I was death gripping the thing. You know, I remember telling you, numb hands within like 30 seconds to a minute. And then I keep pushing it, and I have to stop in like 10 minutes. You know what I mean? I have to stop and like shake my hands out and stuff and calm down and for a while.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, it's you know, one hand fights with the other a little bit too, you know. It's like, okay, you know, and I think that's the way he described it. It was like your arms are kind of like fighting with each other, you know, because they're both, you know, my right one's trying to pull and my left one's pushing, and then, you know, the feedback that you're feeling isn't as natural, I guess. So
I think it's false too. If you have the second one going, like you have you're fighting yourself kind of thing.
Yeah, he says, as soon as the students stop arm wrestling with themselves for control of the handlebars, their bikes become much more efficient turning machines. So freed from the conflicting inputs of the two arms, the bike is allowed to do what it was engineered to do, turning smoother and much quicker at the given speed. So yeah, so I thought that was huge. You know, when I read that, it's like, oh, that's, and the other thing I like is that that's actually an actionable item that you can take from the book. You know, sometimes it's like, if you read, or whatever, textbooks or whatever, you read a lot of stuff, but it's something that you can actually put in practice immediately and get feedback on, you know. yeah, so let's see. I had this plan. I was like, okay, we're just gonna go through each couple of pages and go through step by step, like, you know. But then, of course, once we start talking, we just kind of jump all over the place. But I wanted to go back and kind of define, you know, Raked Trail for a second. Like, you know, I thought this caster wheel, you know, was perfect. So your steering axis, and then it's basically the offset of your steering axis from the contact patch. That's your trail, you know. And then the caster example, you know, it's like a shopping cart. You know, you push a shopping cart and the wheel automatically lines up and then goes in the direction of the shopping cart, you know. And that's kind of exactly, you know, what happens, you know, here. And so the higher the trail value, the stronger the force that keeps it in line, which
the more resistant steering you are as well.
Yes, exactly. Right. So that's the other thing I noticed about motorcycles is that you can't have everything. You know what I mean? If you take one thing away for some benefit, or if you add something on one hand for a benefit, it takes away something else. And this is kind of like the prime example of that. If you reduce your trail, then your handling's better, it turns in quicker, but your stability is less, you know?
Yeah.
It kind of depends on what you want.
What's crazy is I've looked at a lot of numbers of a lot of bikes over the years, and the difference in trail and, you know, the rake and angles and all that stuff is like, it's just a few degrees, and you go from a, you know, a sport touring bike into a whole cruiser bike or something.
Right,
you know?
right.
A few degrees opposite way, and you're up in the sporting bikes, you know.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of like, but I mean, I think a lot of other stuff plays an effect too, because whenever you're braking hard on the front brake, then all that stuff changes as well. So you have to be aware of that. I'm sure. Do you remember? Was it Keith Code, the twist of the wrist?
Yeah.
That one goes into a lot of that, and they actually plan to use that altered geometry to get more steering during the corner,
right?
Then reverse it back to, you know, the upright geometry or whatever for more stability down the next straight.
Right. Because as you brake hard, your suspension compresses, which changes your geometry of your bike, like you were saying. And so you know, that changed geometry on your front fork, you know, is what they're trying to take advantage of to steering quicker. Right.
Exactly. You've seen the MotoGP guys.
Yeah.
Nailing the brakes so hard that their back tire is just
it comes up. You're doing stoppies. Yeah. Can you imagine? Oh, I don't know. It's crazy watching those guys and how good they are. And not even those guys. I'll see YouTube random or Instagram you know, 30-second clips of people riding motorcycles doing crazy shit. Like I saw one just today of a guy on a BMW 1250 GS just ripping it through the dirt and the mud and like just doing wheelies and yeah, and he was just flying. I was like, oh my god. Makes me realize like how far I have to go to get, you know, how it's like how much more you can learn on a motorcycle. Exactly. You know, just watching guys like that. It's crazy.
Yeah, I was actually just watching one the other day. It was police officers on their big cruisers doing like the slow speed stuff.
Oh yeah.
And it's like a ballerina, just, you know what I mean? Yeah. I was like, oh god, that's just ridiculous.
I want to say that the motorcycle, I think the police cops or the motorcycle cops have like some sort of competition of some sort. You know, because there are competitions like that where they have like a small, I say small, but like a parking lot course that's super windy and they have to do slow speed stuff and they have to go. I want to say like there's a competition like that just for the motorcycle cops. I don't know how true that is, but maybe I'm just basing that off of a couple of YouTube videos I saw. But yeah, those dudes. Yeah. And so Raked Trail on a bike. So the before was like basically a shopping cart, but you know, like your pivot point on your steering, you know, here, just based off that line that comes down, it hits the ground, but then the contact patch. So then this is your trail here. So bikes with a higher degree of rake also have a higher degree of trail. And so, you know, this was another one of those aha moments when I saw this. It's like, oh, yes, I get it now, you know. And so, because, you know that choppers and like cruisers have that steeper, or I say steeper, actually, it would be a less steep rake, you know, and then trail. And then you hear people complain like, oh, yeah, it makes it handle like shit, whatever. But this is actually like scientific evidence on why that is. And that's kind of interesting to me. That's one of the things I like about the book. It's as complicated as you want it to be. Like if you're just in it to learn new tips on writing, this is a great book. But then if you also want to get into all the little nitty gritty details about why things act the way they do on a motorcycle, then this has that as well. So
yeah, and it can give you like a lead on how to go.
Uh-oh, I lost you.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. I'm good. Sorry. I was trying something else. I forgot what I was saying. Rake and trail.
Yeah, what were you saying? Sorry. I can hit the rewind button. We can see what you're talking about. But no, yeah, you're just talking about having, we were talking about how the geometry changes the handling of the bike, and like how cruisers, you know, on paper, you know, people say, you know, it has such a, what's the opposite of steep? Like an obtuse angle, like such a low rake, then that's going to handle like shit. And this kind of explains why that is. It's because, you know,
Yeah,
of the
whenever
trail, which gives you more force to combat when you turn.
Whenever they do like a stretched frame, like, you know, like the
yeah.
stuff, but there's also things that combat that extra rake. Like I believe that the Springer front ends, some of that geometry goes into play with kind of negating that extra long rake.
Yeah.
And I haven't done the geometry on it, so I'm not sure, but it's the Springer front end. There's another one that's really weird. So instead of just having a telescopic style fork, you have solid struts going down, and then they have pivots on the bottom, and then there's an arm that reaches forward. So actually,
I've seen those. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen those. Those are weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder what those are like to ride.
I would say not good.
Yeah. They look cool though.
They're cool looking.
Yeah. That's the other thing. I think there's a lot of stylistic choices on bikes that aren't necessarily very good functionally.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's funny. Oh, and this is a good one too. When they're when he's talking about wide tires versus narrow tires and how it affects your steering as well. So, you know, everybody likes the cool big wide tires, but those are actually worse when it comes to handling. And, you know, it's interesting to see, you know, why that is. You know, it's like, oh, okay, now I see why that is, because of you know, basically these distances. You know, you have your center line. Let's use red this time. And then you have, you know, you hit a rock or whatever, and then, you know, your offset of force is smaller on a smaller tire than a wider tire. And so it's like physics, right? And so this is where the force is. It's like force times distance is torque, right? And so if your moment arm is longer and you apply force, then it's gonna be more. Like, so this one, this would be like your fuck, I don't know. I'm terrible at this. Well, it's not working. Anyway, anyway, you know what I mean? So, longer arm, and then you apply a force to it. This is your pivot point, right? And so this is going to have more torque applied to it, which will offset your tire more than the shorter distance with a force applied to it. So anyway.
Same thing with the bottom tires. The wider tire needs more lean angle to reach the same arc point as the skinnier tire.
Exactly. This one was interesting to me too, because this one, when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that pretty much makes sense. But then this one, it's like, oh, that makes sense. This one, I wouldn't have thought of as being an obvious one. You know what I mean? It's like this one, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that seems obvious and makes sense. But this one is like, oh, right, you do need more lean angle because, just like the large this thing has, your center line and then your contact patch, this is a greater angle than if it's a skinnier tire. So, if this is the distance, which gives you the same amount of lean angle, then, you have to lean it further to get to that same point, And so, gosh, yeah. And so I guess we should all have skinny tires then. But then, like I said earlier, you're always giving up something, right? And so, I mean, the thicker tires have a bigger contact patch, so it's like you're always giving up something. There's always a trade-off.
I always found it odd that, like, say on the GSXRs, your 600 will come with a 180 series tire. My SV1000 came with, mind you. But then you jump up to the 750 and it has I think it's like a half an inch wider rim and a 190 series tire, which is the same as the 1000, which is way more powerful.
Right.
Which leads me to wondering why they made those choices. I don't like question Suzuki's choices. I feel like the manufacturers have put in enough time and effort to where their choices are right, but it's mind-boggling. It seems like the 600 and the 750 would probably run the 180, and then when you have 50 more horsepower on top of that, then you're going to need that extra tire,
right?
But I don't know. I really haven't ridden, but maybe one 750, and it was just a quick jaunt, so I couldn't really tell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We need to find some kind of equations or mathematics to run those numbers, because look at my bikes, the 96 to 2000 model, basically GSXRs, the 600, from what I understand, is the 600 is like 95 horsepower at the crankshaft, which is probably 80 something at the tire. And then the 750 was like 115 or 120 at the crank, which meant that was probably more like 108, 105 at the back tire, a substantial difference.
Right.
And I know for a fact that the 01, 02 GSXR 1000 had 163 horsepower at the crank, which was probably 145 to 150 at the tire.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like 40-50% more than that.
Right. So what's the mathematical formula with that? It's like, okay, if I have 50% more horsepower, do I need 50% more tire? I'm sure it's non-linear, right? But
the other factor, weight too, because with the more horsepower, the 1000cc motor and everything weighs more.
Yeah, it all weighs more. Yeah, exactly.
They share the same carcass, like the cases and everything are the same. It's the internals that are different. So the weight is literally, now I will say that the 750 has a little bit heavier front forks because they're the upside downs. And then it had a braced swing arm versus the 600 that had the no brace. But then we can go back to my bike, my SV1000. It has a 180 series back tire, but it makes gobs more torque than all of those bikes. Doesn't make the horsepower is the same. It's like 105. It's probably 95 to the back tire, but the torque is substantial. that bike, lower RPM, higher torque,
right,
motor. And so it seems like, why wouldn't you throw a 190 on there? But maybe it's because it's more of a commuter thing, and it's not pushed as hard as well. You know, the choice of tire also goes back to what are you going to do with it and what's your skill level. Because when I first had my GSXR running years ago, I put on Pirelli Diablo Rossos, which are an actual sport bike tire, and they were slick. Riding it at first, they'd have to warm up, otherwise they felt greasy.
Right.
And then when I was looking for tires for the SV, I called Moto Mummy there in Austin, and I talked to that guy, and he's like, "You don't want a full-on sport tire because you're going to take forever to warm up, and it's beyond like a sport touring tire will warm up quickly for you and have good grip all the time." So, because mostly I commuted to work, and then we did our rides. You know, I never did track riding or anything, so I didn't get to that point.
Yeah, I remember we talked a little bit about that last time when we were talking about traction. Is that, you know, you don't want the best sport tires to go right around on the street. You know what I mean? Because that's actually worse for you, because you're not going to get them warmed up to the point where they can provide enough stick, you know. And so they're actually worse than, you know, a good sport touring tire. Plus, you know, sport touring, just a standard sport touring tire has a little bit better longevity, you know. So why wouldn't you get one of those? And I think a lot of people get caught into that trap of, oh, I got a sport bike, I got to get the most badass tires. Look how awesome I am. You know, the street Rossies, you know.
Tire. Yeah. But you can't. You're not pushing it to that point where you need that, or it's even beneficial to you.
Yeah, exactly. What are the pictures that I got here? Oh, you know,
short chapter.
What's that?
It says kind of a short chapter.
Oh, yeah. Actually, when I went through it and I was kind of trying to decide if we should do 1 or 2 chapters, for some reason I was thinking it was pretty involved, so we should, you know, just, you know, concentrate on only 1 chapter this time, which, I mean, I guess it is kind of an important one, so we should probably give it the attention it deserves.
Definitely agree.
Yeah, and so this one, center of gravity, is kind of like what we were talking about with the tire width, on how it affects your lean angle, right? And so this one, if you have a higher center of gravity, you don't have to lean the angle or lean the bike as much to get the same amount of turn, because you know, if this is the distance you need to achieve that turn, if your center of gravity is higher, you can achieve that distance at a lower angle, you know. So, you know, I thought that was another good example too of just you know, with illustrations and science showing you why that's the case, you know. And it's one thing I noticed about MotoGP bikes. If you look at them, it's like it does look like the center of gravity's high on those, you know, because, you know, they've got the tires, and, like, you know, the riders are up high, their foot pegs are super high, so the riders, you know, way up high, so, you know, their center of gravity is way up. And that's one thing I noticed on my Versus, is it's a tall bike, you know, and I feel like it leans into corners great, you know. Like, I don't know how far I got to go to get a knee down on that bike, but it just feels like an eternity. I feel like I've done a couple of turns where I feel like I'm fairly leaned over, but I don't think I'm anywhere near to having a knee down. You know what I mean?
Well, all you got to do is look at the condition of your tire. See where the wear goes.
Yeah, look at the chicken strips, right? I have no shame. I have chicken strips.
Same. We'll get there.
Proud That's why we're it. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing about this center of gravity, like, I had to look at this a bunch of times, but whenever it makes sense, whenever you read the part where it says the center of gravity is displaced equally from that vertical center line.
Right.
When you can stop and think about that. So that's the ultimate, that's what you're looking for in the turn with, you know, on a what do they call it? A single track vehicle.
Yeah.
You center of gravity to the way you want to turn, but it seems like that lean angle, that the angle of that cone or whatever that you're looking at, you know, when you reach that point on the tire, it's that's what you're looking for. But to get there, the center of gravity is still dictating that, which is kind of, you know,
yeah,
it's the tire's round and it would do it itself, but apparently
your lean also has something to do with it. And that's the other thing. It's like, it's a combination of so many different things. And I think that's why, maybe that's what makes motorcycle riding fun, is that, you know, a double track, like you're saying, double tracked vehicle turning is different. On a single track vehicle, there's a lot more forces and factors in play. And one of them is, you know, the lean angle with regards to the tire width, which, you know, going back to the cup example, right? And so that's one factor that's turning your bike is, you know, the more it's leaned over, it's like you have a steeper cup that rolls in that circle, right? But then the other thing is that the center of gravity comes into play too, even though I don't think it's quite as much. In the higher center of gravity means you don't have to lean the bike as much because I don't know, the way I think of it in my mind is like, as you're going around a curve, you have forces pushing your bike to stand up this way. The centripetal force is pushing your bike this way. So you have to counter that with having it leaned in. And if you have a higher center of gravity, it doesn't have to be as much, right?
It's the lever.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the further out it is away from its axis point or whatever, like it's making more, it's having more effect per degree because it has, I guess, more torque or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's essentially this picture. It's just the distance that you need to offset in order to make that turn is just less. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like there's so many things to keep in mind when you're doing it. But, you know, when you're doing it, you just kind of do what feels right. And it just happens to be the combination of all these things of you know, leaning in and so forth. I thought the interesting thing that the center of gravity bit example was let's see, it makes the center of gravity affects your steering, but I don't think it affects it as much as counter steering or just the lean angle itself. And the reason was the example that it was actually in Keith Code's Twist of the Wrist was he had that bike that had two sets of handlebars, and one set of handlebar was the dummy handlebar that didn't turn. And they were like pushing down on one end and like standing on it and trying to push, you know, pushing down doesn't really do shit, right? It's all about pushing that, you know, forward. And so they were trying to use with that straight handlebar, just weight shifts and pushing down. Yeah. And so doing the weight shift, which does change your center of gravity, but it was almost like it helped a little, but it was not the deciding factor in making the turn, right? So if I had a bike that if I could not lean and use steering inputs, or if I could not use steering inputs and only lean to make turns, you know, I'd be dead if I was just leaning to make turns, right? It's the steering input has a far greater impact on your actual steering than the, you know, weight shifts, right?
Yeah. Well, ultimately the weight shift, like, especially whenever you slide off and, you know, you're trying to drag a knee and all that, literally that's just to be able to corner as hard as possible. It's that's one of those, just to get that your center of gravity, your weight inside of the turn, so that you don't have to lean the bike over so far.
Right.
Or you can lean further and maintain traction, I guess.
Right. Because ultimately ultimately you want the lowest lean angle possible to make the turn, because the greater your lean angle, the less traction you're going to have, because contact patch and your suspension isn't working in its optimal position. Because suspension, remember, like up and down works better than if it's on its side. You know, you don't have as much suspension keeping your tire on the pavement, because as you hit bumps, you know, you don't have that direct pushing back down. It's at an angle, so your suspension isn't working as optimally to keep your tire on the ground.
Yeah. When you're in that lean angle, you're only getting a percentage of that because the suspension's designed to work up and down perpendicularly or whatever.
Right.
Which I never even thought about that until reading that stuff in this book.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same way, because, you know, it's kind of like sometimes you have to have Captain Obvious say things, and then it's like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense, because when you're leaned over, your suspension isn't working to its full potential in keeping the tire on the ground.
Well, and here's the other thing that keeps going back and forth in my mind, and I know that the oil in my forks are pretty fresh because I rebuilt the forks a couple of years ago and did seals on them, but I haven't done anything with the shock yet. And if you ever watch, what's that guy? There's a guy on YouTube, and his name is. It's kind of like, he looks kind of like Keith Code, like he's got that. He's Dave Moss Tuning.
Oh, okay. I don't think I know him.
You ever seen him?
Mm-mm.
Okay, check out Dave Moss Tuning. Like, so he has people bring their track bikes to his little van thing, and he's got all this.
Oh, really?
And and he'll like get their weight, their body weight, you know, the weight with all their gear, and then he'll start looking over the bike and see if it's stock or whatnot. And he just has this running like Rolodex of information in his brain, but so that he'd check out the bike, and with the information that they can provide, like, you know, it's stock, this and that, and blah, 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 and his weight, your weight, they'll know how to set all the clickers and all the doodads and preload and all that stuff. Excuse me.
You know what? I think maybe you said the same thing last time. You were like, hey, check out this. It might have been the same guy. It's like there's a guy about setting up suspension. I think maybe you mentioned him last time, and I was like, no, I've never.
But so one of his critical things, one of his key points that he makes known to everybody that he's working with, he asks everybody, like, how long has it been since the suspension's been rebuilt? Like, and he was giving them like track bikes, I'd say like 3,000 miles to change, you know, just like engine oil kind of thing.
Yeah. Huh.
So what I read was, and I read this a long time ago, you know, oil in the forks, oil in the shock.
Right.
It all breaks down every time the shock moves, every time the forks move, which is all the time you're moving, that oil gets used, and you know what I mean? Like there's weight there. So if you don't change that oil, then it breaks down and then further compounds. So like your suspension will degrade. So what we're feeling today with old suspension that hasn't been rebuilt is not like the capability of the bike.
Right.
And I don't know anybody really that just changes the oil in their shock, really.
Yeah.
You know? I've done the oil, and I'll probably do it again on the SV. I don't know, probably mid-season or so, depending on how it runs, depending on what happens to GSXR.
Yeah, I mean, I've never done forks on any of my bikes, so yeah, maybe in the future, maybe that might be a good video.
Big video.
Yeah. epic fork change.
The Z would be a good place to start, because I don't think you need any special tooling for that one.
Yeah. If you notice, most of actually all of my maintenance videos are all on the Z because it's easier.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done oil changes on the Versus, but I haven't, you know, and I had to fix the clutch cable, but I haven't really done a whole lot of maintenance on that one yet. Yeah.
The clutch cable would have been critical. That was before we were.
Yeah, that was that. Remember that ride we went on, and I
Dumped it
dumped
on
it.
the sidewalk.
Yeah, screwed up the cable, and then I got all stressed out because then the shifting wasn't working. I was like, oh man, I'm not gonna be able to get home. And then it turned out it's just the cable.
Yeah, we just readjusted it, right?
Yeah, but I think also it was down to just a couple of strands of it.
Yeah.
I was all nervous that it was gonna break.
Good times.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That was a good ride. I think that was
Yeah.
the first time I met Mark.
Yeah, that might have been. Yeah, we were out for a while. That was like an all day thing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was actually the one where we ended up heading north, and then you split off to head home. And then when I was heading home, that's when that rainstorm intersected me.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So frozen.
Yeah. We've got caught in a couple rainstorms before. Like I remember that one out to Inks Lake, or by that cave. We went to that cave,
Yeah,
and it was raining. It kind of rained a lot that day.
Yeah. That was still fun though. That cave was.
Yeah, that was cool. That was really fun. Oh, I'm trying to so that castle that we saw from remember that castle kind of off in the distance? It's called Falkenstein Castle. Maybe I should not say this on the air because someone will steal my idea. But the idea was that I wanted to just go there and just do like a little episode where we ride out there and maybe take a tour of the castle and check it out.
Is that possible?
Well, maybe, because here's the thing. It used to be a venue that you could rent out, and then it got closed down. Like it's a private residence essentially. And then they opened it up at one point to have events. I know they had like a concert there one time. But this was years ago. But recently I saw on their Facebook page that they're starting to open up for events and tours and shit like that again. And
Cool.
So I actually sent them an email, but I don't think they got it, or they just totally ignored me because they never replied. But I've been thinking about reaching out to them and asking them if they would be down for something like that, because I think that would be kind of fun.
Get some prior permission to film.
Yeah, exactly. And like just take a little tour and just like have the guy tell us about it, and we can, take some drone shots or something.
You remember when we rode out to it was the big lake, and we met that, I think it was a lady. She was like a game warden or whatever. She was talking
yeah.
That would have been
that was, I wish we had, I wish I had a camera rolling that day, because that was out at Lake Buchanan, I think.
Yes, that's
Lake Buchanan. We went out to Lake Buchanan, and yeah, I mean, it's like this lake, and you can go up the right side and you can go up the left side, but you can't go all the way around it because the way it's dammed off and blah, blah, blah. And so we went up all the way around the right side of it till it basically just ended at this state park, essentially, right? Well, it was a state park of some sort, but then it also seemed to have kind of like this private club kind of thing, because it looked like there was like this little swanky club party there going on, like the fancy restaurant by the lake kind of stuff. But the lady the old lady at the gate, she was so nice. It was funny because we just go down the road and it just ends, and there's just like the little guardhouse with the lady letting people in and out and that kind of stuff. And there wasn't any traffic. I don't remember. There was like maybe one or two other cars that went through the whole time we were there. And that lady was telling us these stories about like the aloe plants and like lizards, and
she got bit by a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
So, like she's kind of immune or whatever. But then there was another rattlesnake, this big old boy that lived right there. He's like, I keep an eye on him. Like, why don't you trap that son of a bitch and remove it or blast it?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that was hilarious. But yeah, that was totally like, you watch these shows like Long Way Round with Ewan McGregor and Charlie Borman, and they go to places and they take tours, and they do these local things where they meet people and whatever. And Have you seen Moto Geo? That's another channel that I've been watching a bit. It's this guy named Jamie. I can't remember his last name, but he's like this British guy, and it's basically he just goes and does cool little motorcycle adventures and films everything. You know, like he'll go out and try new restaurants or whatever, or go to events, and he'll do shit like that, like what we did. And like he, you know, I just wish we had a film crew just filming that whole interaction, because that was hilarious.
Yeah.
So
well, I kind of reconnected with some old friends here, and they're Harley riders, so I'm gonna experience that this pretty soon. Yeah, they do kind of like what we do. They just go and choose a route and a destination and go food and
ride around a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. So my last picture is basically the steering inputs on a turn. So like we were talking about earlier, like your first one is you push you push your steering. So here we're making a right hand turn, right?
So you're pushing with the right hand, steering the front wheel slightly to the left.
Right. And so we're pushing with we're pushing with the right. So our tire now goes outside the track. Out tracking causes the lean to turn into AKA counter steering. So here's our track, and then our steering input pushes our wheel outside our track, right? So change lean angle using out tracking. So that causes the bike to dip in because we changed our steering input to go outside the track, and now our lean angle dips in. So motorcycle is upright, traveling straight, initiate the turn entry using counter steering. Boom, that's this part. So here, constant lean angle using direct steering to control the line. So here, neutral steering with small inputs maintains lean angle in line. So that's the other thing I do remember from, you know, your MSF course, etc., is you do a steering input, and then that's it. You kind of maintain it, and it's supposed to carry you all the way through your curve. And so basically that's this point. So you turn in, and then here you try to like no steering inputs. It's just neutral.
You want a smooth, clean arc.
Nice and smooth, right? Exactly. And then at the exit, initiate turn exit using counter steering. So basically we push it back. In tracking causes the bike to stand up, AKA counter steering. So now we're in track, or inside the track of our path. Motorcycles are upright and traveling straight. Boop. So change lean angle using in tracking. And then when we're out, we're back to being stood straight back up. So this was also a good diagram, I thought, because it kind of really breaks down all the steps. And I remember was it this book? Maybe it was Keith Code's. I thought it was this one, but they had that. They call it. So if you're not doing this right, and you're coming in, and then maybe you have to turn in more, then you're, oh shit, I turned too much. I have to let off, and I gotta come back out.
And so, that was Keith Code.
Yeah, he called it, what do you call it? He called it 50 pensing. And I remember that because it's called 50 pensing because there's a coin. It's like a British coin or something.
Yeah.
That the shape of it is not round, right? It's more like,
yeah, it looks like that. Yeah,
it's more like stop sign shaped or whatever.
It's got a bunch of small. Yeah. It's a polygon.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, so it's basically like a hexagon or whatever. And then so the idea, they call it 50 pensing because the 50 pence coin was like this. And so that instead of like one input that makes it all around, you're like, steering input, steering. It's like multiple steering inputs, you know. And so they called it 50 pensing when you have to do multiple steering inputs during your curve. So that's one of the other random things that I remember, and I actually think about when I'm turning. You know, I'm out riding and I'm going on like a sweeping turn or something, and I find myself like, you know, changing my steering inputs mid corner. I'm like, oh no, I'm 50 pensing.
In order to 50 pence, it seems like you'd have to make 2 or more corrections. Because you have
Right.
at least 2 facets, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. In theory, it would require at least 2, I suppose. Cool. Yeah, so I thought that was a good chapter because, steering, that's like the fundamental thing that you do on a motorcycle. It's like
it's the best part of it, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Steering and acceleration. Both of those things
Yeah.
what it's all about.
Yeah. And I think it's also one of those underappreciated things in motorcycles. People say motorcycle riding is difficult or whatever, and it's just because of things like this. You have to do more in order to operate it. I think people who drive cars, I mean, we all drive cars, but when you drive a car, you take for granted what it takes to get that thing to turn. You know what I mean?
Well, think about this. So it takes a little bit more attention in order to drive a manual, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, for sure.
So we're shifting to that way where we're trying to, people don't want to invest the attention to ride a bike.
Right.
I guess we're getting down to, because you can't find a manual. Like I was looking at new cars, 2021 models, and unless you want a Porsche or a certain Ferrari and this and that, it's like you can only get stuff from Korea and you know what I mean? Like the Honda, Kia, and maybe a couple others. That's all you can get with a man. Blows my mind.
I remember an article a while back. It was like, these are the 10 cars you can still buy with a manual transmission. And I think half of those cars they don't even make anymore because that article was, a few years old. But yeah, it's hard to find one with a manual transmission now, for sure. Yeah. That's one thing I liked about my RX-8. It's like, it had a manual transmission, it's kind of a cool little car. It was fun to drive. And when I got rid of that, I was kind of bummed because, my replacement car is a Chevy Volt. It's like the opposite of what that car was. It's an automatic. Not only is it automatic, it's got like a CVT transmission. Like there's no shifting, and it's a electric. And so it's like, it's not fully electric like a Tesla. So the engine does kick in, when you go over 40 miles. But for the most part, the driving experience is so sterile, it's like, it doesn't make much noise. It just kind of goes, it's, and so that's one of the reasons. What's that?
I was going to say that is absolutely perfect for the cold winters around here. Like one thing that I was worried about with my car is I only live a few miles away from my work. It takes me like 4 minutes to drive there.
Yeah.
So day to day, starting an engine and going a few minutes and then stopping it is bad for it. Like it'll warm up enough to where it'll condense water inside there, but it won't boil water out. So then with all this water inside the crankcase, and you can pull engine like that. So I start it and let it run for a while before I move stuff. But electric cars don't need to warm up.
Yeah, you just turn it on, turn on the heated seats, you're good to go. Yeah.
You got heated seats?
Yeah.
Damn it, man.
Nice. Well, it's one of those things. It's because that car, like, when it's really cold, the engine will kick on to help warm it up. But yeah, I find myself kind of cold in that car sometimes when it's not quite freezing. It's like 40 degrees because, and I think the heated seats aren't necessarily like one of those, ooh, it's fancy, it has heated seats. It's more like it's a more efficient way to heat the car than to use electricity to power the fan and heat the element to blow the air past the heating element. I think they're like, hey, we'll just heat the seat. It's actually more efficient. And so everything in that car is built for efficiency. Like it's got this skirt around the front of it to try to help with the aerodynamics and just, shit like that, And so I think it's more of just trying to be more efficient than it is to be fancy. But yeah. And so when I got the motorcycle, it was like, oh yes, I'm back to a manual transmission. And, it was like the RX-8, except even more so, because now like you said, it's a manual transmission. Plus, you're doing more with steering inputs, etc. You know, and I think that's why, because if you think about it, motorcycles have had automatic transmissions for a while. You know, I mean, Honda's had their CVT, or what's it called? Is it CVT? I don't know. The Honda
yeah,
DCT,
Honda-matic.
DCT. Yeah, the Honda's DCT transmission's been around for a while, from what I understand. But you know, it's just a handful of bikes that have automatic transmissions, and then the e-bikes, of course. You know, still the vast majority are manual transmissions, even though they do have quick shifters and auto blip downshifts and all that kind of stuff now, which kind of, I don't know. That's kind of like the paddle shifter version of a manual transmission. You know, when a fancy car has, oh, we'll have these paddle shifters. It's like, well, it's not the same as the clutch, you know, or whatever. But yeah, but I think it's because people enjoy that part of riding. You know, like it's that manual input that kind of makes you feel like you're doing something. You know.
Yeah, it's just full control to me. You know, I just like, yeah. Now it would be interesting. Honda does make, or for a couple of years, I think 2 years, they made an Interceptor 1200. It's a V4 adventure, or it might be a sport touring bike. But this thing had all kinds of neat things, like instead of the way the engine architecture was, it's a 4-cylinder, but it's a V4. So the rear 2 cylinders were inboard, and then the 4 2-cylinders, the ones pointing forward, were outboard. That way, the passenger area, or the rider area, is still more compact, and it doesn't have to compromise the size of it. But then it had that DCT style transmission, and from everything that I read, all the reviews and stuff, that thing is almost like the equivalent of like that 10-speed auto that's in the Mustang GT versus the 6-speed manual. The 6-speed manual loses in the drag strip. That Mustang will bang like 6 or 7 gears in a quarter mile and decimate the 6-speed manual.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, it sucks. But now the manual still has a home on a road racing course. You still want to be in control of that because you use it for more than just acceleration. But that's all for another day anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that Honda, it's ugly as hell. It is one of the worst looking bikes.
I'll have to look that up. Is that what when did that come out? Was it an 80s bike?
No, the Interceptor 1200 is like 2016, 2017 or something.
Oh, it's really?
Weird slab fairings and stuff, and it's pukey in my eyes. It looks like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's awful looking, but it's a cool bike.
Huh. Oh, okay. This guy?
Yeah. You see how those sides
it is kind of weird looking. I mean, I'm not one to talk. The Versus is universally lauded as one of the ugliest bikes, but you know.
Yeah. But then again, if you look at the older V-Stroms, they're pretty dang ugly as well.
I mean,
pretty much all the adventure bikes, they just have a weird aesthetic because you still have bearing and stuff to them, but then they throw a motocross front fender on there.
Something weird. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, come on, guys.
Yeah, that is true. Adventure bikes do kind of look, they're not always the coolest looking bikes. That's for sure.
This thing is ugly as sin, but it's such a cool bike. There's so much tech in it, but they only put it out for 2 years. And I haven't really heard much about it. They hold their value, but it's like, I don't think I would buy one just because they were so rare.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it didn't pan out. I would buy an older VFR 800, the older Interceptor. Is pretty sweet.
Yeah, I do like those VFR 800s. Those are pretty cool bikes. You're right. Those old
V-Stroms. That's the older V-Strom.
Yeah, those were kind of ugly.
Looks dorky as hell.
Yeah. Like, yeah, the VFR 800. Wait, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, what the hell is all that shit on the front of that thing? It's so blocky.
Yeah, I do remember the VFR 800 being cool, almost like a little Ducati or something.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Single-sided swing arm V4 that sounds great.
What were you
decent
thinking?
seating.
All this shit?
Yeah,
This front?
that's ugly.
Yeah.
That whole front end is like, what is all that? It's, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think the newer ones do look better. This is kind of cool. I'd
you
ride
know,
this. No problem.
old Ninjas looked. You meant like the old Ninja 500.
Yeah.
That dude
Yeah.
that's a great bike, but they are so ugly.
Like this guy. That is pretty ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look at my bike. I mean, the newer ones look pretty good. Like these guys.
They do. I like the big one, 1000.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Versus 1000 is a great looking bike. Let's see. Mine's 2009. There it is. There's my bike. Yeah.
She is.
I mean,
it's not.
I mean,
bad.
this is a good
weird
picture of it. This is a pretty good picture of it. I think that's going to be one of the next videos. Is going to be kind of like a Versus 650 review, and really kind of like take some dramatic pictures of it to make it look like it's super badass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Did I lose you?
Did I lose you?
I think we're back.
I'm almost out of power.
Okay. That's cool. Well, it's all right. We can wrap up. I think we're pretty good on talking about steering, unless you have any final thoughts on steering.
It's good to do whenever you need to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty basic, but it's like, I don't know, you have to get out there and ride a little bit to experience.
Well, the other thing, it's like,
talk about it, not know.
Yeah. The other thing, it's like anyone who's ridden a bicycle has done it, you know, because you counter steer on a bike, right?
But
on a bicycle.
the thing is with the bicycle, I was reading about this because I thought about that as a kid, as I don't remember counter steering. The angle is so slight that you really don't notice it.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's like tires are super thin, right? And so, like they were showing earlier, you don't have to, you know, it's easier to steer because your contact patch isn't that far off your
so you throw 3 or 2 steering to it and you're leaning,
right? Plus you're not going as fast. I think that's the other thing. It's like the speed that you're going. Like you can get going pretty fast on a bicycle, but generally when you're making a turn on a bicycle, you're going fairly slow. And I think there's also this kind of, I don't know, intuitiveness when you're on a bike. You're just kind of, you're doing what your body has this natural reaction on. It kind of knows what it wants to do. Kind of like when they're saying to look where you want to turn. That's the thing that we didn't really talk about. But, you know, you look where you want to turn. Like even if it's like if I'm making a U-turn, I want to turn a lot and really look all the way, because it's like your body has this natural ability to self-balance and do what you are inherently wanting to do. Like I want to do a U-turn, so I'm going to look all the way over there. Somehow magically my bike has done that because my body knows how to balance itself in order to do what it's thinking it's supposed to do. You know, I dumped it that one time, you know, that we were talking about earlier. I was looking right at my front tire, like, oh shit, there's my front tire, there's the ditch, my front tire, ditch, front tire, ditch, front tires in the ditch, and then I was down, right? And which is, you know, not what I should have been doing. I should have been going, oh, I want to go that way and go that way. But I was so worried about making the turn that I didn't make the turn. And that's like the whole self-fulfilling prophecy of, you know, not looking where you want to go. Yeah. And so I think on a bicycle, you kind of you're not going as fast. But also I think that, you know, it's also much lighter. So you just kind of have this inherent ability to turn it and lean it and not really think about things like counter steering and lean angle and all that kind of stuff.
Natural fluid thing.
Yeah. So anyway, cool, man. Well, yeah. I mean, I like doing these because I think it's good to rehash this info, and you know, hopefully people out there find it useful if they want to follow along. We have whopping 29 views on our last book club, so we're
Really?
coming up
Not.
strong.
Like I said, sometimes it takes a while. We'll get there.
Yeah.
We're not even.
It's not about the views.
You already got a Maxima
It's
hit.
about the passion. That's right. Maxima wants to give us a fuel additive for half price.
Fuck yeah.
If we review it. So sponsored link. Yeah.
Give it 2 more years. We'll be there.
Yeah. I mean, I think really it's just, you know, I'm having fun with the channel. It's not, you know, I'm not trying to stress myself out about it. And I'm also, you know, but, you know, the things I do want to put out there, I want them to be either informative or entertaining or both. So, you know, I think as long as we keep doing that and, you know, keep at it, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, but it's not a big deal. So
guess we'll see.
Gonna knock Yami new off his throne.
Right.
I do kind of like the idea of maybe giving away shit. Maybe we can start giving things away. I do kind of like the idea of giving things away.
So I have at work, I can machine stuff. Like I'm making all kinds of crap, but I'm looking at building a small CNC router.
Okay.
I was thinking it'd be pretty neat to start cutting up our epic motorcycle logo on some like
kind of cool,
you know, coins about this big. We can start those away.
Maybe like like a little. Can you put like a little loop, a little hole in it to maybe make it a keychain kind of thing?
Yeah, keychain.
That'd be kind of cool.
This big, we can make them this big, like a big old belt buckle or something on the wall. Or
yeah, the little ones would be kind of cool for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I also thought about T-shirts. You know, start giving away T-shirts. Maybe print off some T-shirts with our logo on it.
I don't know if you have a plug for that, but I think I do. There's a place in Newcastle, the town where my girl is, and they do small order T-shirt shit like that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
I could get 50 or 100 of them or some shit, like $4, something like that.
Yeah,
$200 outlay, but I'll check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Get some quotes. I'll definitely be interested in doing something like that.
Cool.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, hat.
A hat. Yeah.
Yes.
Because, you know, you go places with your helmet. You got helmet head. And you put on a hat.
Up with a hat. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Just makes sense.
Yeah. Cool, man. All right. Well, I'll let you go. Thanks for tuning in and chatting with me.
Right on. It was cool. We finally got the second one going. Hopefully the third one won't take so long.
Yeah, we'll do the next one here pretty soon. So
word up.
Cool, man.
All right.
All right. Later.
Talk to you later, bud.
Bye.
Latest.